They humped the prisoners in through the glassless mouth of Emma's diner. Chesterton, with his university pallor, arm twisted behind his back. Peterson, the Army Service Corps driver, already leaking blood down the side of his face from the butt of Nordberg's rifle. Harry Tagilla kept his shotgun in their shadows, shepherding with professional loathing. The group, each haunted or hounded, funneled the prisoners to a ring of upturned stools. Nordberg dragged a battered milk crate to serve as a judge's dais. Behind the counter, Harrison rooted through desiccated sugar sachets and found only old cockroaches, which he crunched absently between his thumb and the chrome. Bobby Valente stared at the street, rifle at half-mast, as if expecting a miracle or a mass grave. Helmut Blut watched Chesterton with detached Germanic interest, cataloguing ticks and tremors like a naturalist. The light was wan, jaundiced. The diner's ancient refrigerator whined with the endless dying note of a world long since unplugged. Trevor Butler gripped the edge of a scorched Formica tabletop. The skin around his eyes looked stitched from an older, harder animal. "Let's keep this polite, gentlemen," he said, voice as thin as razors. "I want to know where my son is. Dr. Chesterton, you first." Chesterton opened his mouth, closed it. Sweat beaded his temples. I'm not with them, not really. I was in Sugar Hill, just a research position. Then Conrad Krieg called. I owed him from years before. It was supposed to be a few months, tops." "Conrad Krieg?" Gustav clarified, his voice measured, interested but not eager. "Who the fuck is Conrad Krieg?" "Dawsonville," Chesterton whispered. "He's in league with Cyrus. After the Atlanta perimeter fell, they built up a they call it a medical evaluation facility. It's more like..." He licked his lips, found no saliva. "A stockyard for teens." Harry jabbed the shotgun at his kidneys. "Get to the meat, Doc." Chesterton jumped. "They're running experiments, behavioral mostly. The outbreaks in the South didn't match projections. They're obsessed with children with AB negative blood. They want to understand more about this Hafnen syndrome. They're trying to train walkers." Trevor's hands curled into claws. "Is Toby alive?" Yes, as of yesterday he was. They keep the minors isolated, strict separation protocols, and the infected are always observed as well. Never left alone with the control group. That's all I know." Helmut interjected. "Who guards the facility?" "Cyrus Black, ex-Special Forces, and a handful of his operators, I guess 12, 15 at most. They keep to themselves, no contact with the town or the medical staff for that matter." Valente took his eyes from the window, chewing on each word. "What's the layout?" "Entrances, security." Chesterton's gaze went unfocused. "It's buried in a hillside, part of an old government lab from the 60s. One guarded loading bay, heavy gates, lots of guns. There's a secondary tunnel, used to be a sewer line, now sealed except for the last 300 meters. There is an access, it's from a fountain in the town center, but it's booby-trapped and under guard." He looked to Peterson for affirmation. Peterson's face worked, but he spat on the floor and mumbled, "We only drove the supply trucks. Swear to God, but yeah, it's a fortress. We just deliver the stuff. Gas, medicine, ammo, never inside the laboratory area." Harry gave a little laugh. "You really expect us to believe you never peeked?" Peterson shook his head, tongue flicking over his ruined lip. "Didn't want to see. Sometimes we'd hear the kids, though, screaming, like they were watching someone cut up a dog and make the dog clap for it." A silence, heavy and hungry, rippled through the room. Trevor stepped from behind the counter, wiped his hands on his cargo pants. "How many children exactly?" Chesterton's voice was a tight helium squeak. 5, maybe 6. It changes. Turnover. They keep detailed records but won't let us see. The infected, there's a separate holding cell. Juveniles only. Last I saw it was 12, maybe 15. Trevor's lips twitched. 15 children caged. Not children, Helmut corrected, not after. Nordberg grunted, knuckles gone white on the crate. "And what about adult walkers?" Chesterton shook his head. "None. They incinerate any adult subject within the hour. Only the juveniles are kept. Something about cognitive drift and limbic reversion." Trevor leaned in, shadows turning his face to burned parchment. "If you're lying, I'll know. And I'll make you wish you'd been in Atlanta when the wall came down." Peterson's chin quivered. "We're not lying. Nobody leaves alive. Nobody. I saw Krieg shoot 2 young sisters, said the risk was too high. Next day he had 2 more kids in the cell." The wind played with a strand of plastic bunting above the window, a whimpering sound. Bobby Valente spat on the floor and ground it out with his boot. We're going to get Toby and kill these monsters. Nordberg looked at Trevor and Bobby. Yep, we know where and who. The rest is getting in and executing. Trevor's smile was ugly. We've been nearly dead before. That never stopped us. He looked to Bobby. Scout the approaches at first light. Helmut, you're with me on strategy. Nordberg, keep watch and double the perimeter guard. He jabbed a finger at Chesterton. You two don't eat, piss, or sneeze unless one of us is standing over you. Got it? Chesterton nodded, eyes hollowed by the gravity of things. Peterson curled in on himself, mouthing prayers to a god that had already abandoned them. They dragged the prisoners to a storage closet and cuffed them to the mop sink, closing the door with a rusted padlock. For a few minutes, only the sound of the wind and the low animal breathing of a group not yet dead. When Trevor spoke again, it was to no one in particular. They took Toby. We will take him back. In the silence, the thought ripened, rotten and sweet. Dawn turned the streets to bruised parchment. The air carried the scent of iron and wet dirt, promising weather but only delivering memories of better mornings. The plan was simple: move at the margins, avoid the Guardians' patrols, and kill anyone who noticed the margin shifting. Bobby Valente slipped ahead, weaving between flattened sedans and shattered mailbox posts, all the while muttering what might have been a prayer or a curse. He ghosted up the old fire escape and found the roof as brittle as stale matzah. The slates wobbled under his weight, and a louvered vent snapped off in his hand. He found a vantage with good eyes on the far avenue, blinked and spotted the sun flash of a scope lens 5 houses down, perched inside an old garage. He keyed the walkie, voice a dry scrape. Sniper, East End, he's got the pump islands clear. Another might be nearby. From somewhere below, Trevor's voice. Mark them, but stay dark. We need access to the tunnels. Bobby shifted, set to crawl back, and his boot toe clacked against loose tile. It tumbled off the eaves and shattered on the alley below. The spotter, a man in greasy cargo pants, looked up, keen to investigate the noise. Across the block, Nordberg melted from behind the car wash and in through the back window, keeping to the oil stains and trash hollows. He sighted the sniper, hunched over his rifle on a threadbare camping chair. Nordberg went low and fast. The axe came up with a two-handed swing and split the sniper's head like a shucked fruit. Blood pattered onto the scope, the stock, the floor. The sound, wet and final, brought out a muffled chuckle from Harry, who'd found a dark joy in these mornings. Nordberg rolled the corpse aside and took up the dead man's rifle. It was suppressed, but not silenced. He cranked the elevation, watching through the scope as the spotter returned from investigating Bobby's noise. The man moved with the confidence of someone who'd practiced this route many times before. Nordberg put a single round through his spine. The spotter fell and didn't move again. A triangle of hand signals between roofs, and then the team melted into the courtyard near the fountain. The town's main drag was a war memorial of shattered shop fronts and the junked skeletons of pickup trucks. They regrouped at the wastewater runoff, a concrete cyst under the plaza's fountain. Helmut had already opened the rusted grating, wedged it with a pry bar. Bobby went in first, coughing at the ammonia and rot. Stark and Harry followed, then Trevor with the map, Nordberg covering their 6. Each footstep squelched in a cold syrup of sewage and rain. Stark whispered, "What's our air quality in here?" Trevor, "Not great, but we're not here for the tour." For 200 meters, the only company was the echo of their own passage, the plink of fetid drops off the ceiling, and the sudden, frantic scurry of rat feet. The walls converged, coffin narrow, then widened again to a manhole with a welded lid. Stark checked the schematic, blinked at the faint blue glow from his device. This should be the catchment. If there's a breach, we're close. They didn't hear the walkers until they rounded the first bend. 3 of them, chained together, stripped to rags, faces blanched like papier-mâché. The chain gave them an orbit, a kind of dance. One lurched forward, the other 2 reeled back, then they'd tumble in a heap and drag up, jaws champing at the air. Trevor took point, blade low. He waded into their radius, let the first one snap at his glove, then buried the kukri in its temple. The recoil sent gore arcing against the tunnel wall. The second fell easier, its head soft as a cored melon. The third, a little girl in a polka dot dress, had to be held by the throat while Trevor worked the knife in, gentle and slow, as if afraid of hurting her. No one spoke for a while after that. They pressed on, boots heavy with the burden of it. After 3 bends and a climb over a trash snag, Bobby Valente tripped a length of fishing wire strung knee-high across the passage. The click was not loud, but it was final. Trevor had enough time to hiss, "Down!" before the shotgun wired to the ceiling fired. The slug missed Harry by a hair, but the blast pattern chewed up the left wall and sent a cloud of concrete shrapnel into Bobby's side. He staggered, dropped to one knee, gasping. Blood ran in 3 neat streams over his belt, and part of his ear hung loose, and a huge chunk of shoulder now missing. Harrison got to him first, propping him up and applying a pressure bandage. Helmut tore off part of his shirt and made a crude sling. Harry found the tripwire and followed it back to a secondary trigger, a failover in case the first shot didn't do the job. They kept moving, slower now, Bobby shivering but too proud to ask for the painkillers Harrison offered. The tunnel narrowed, then angled upward. At the end, a concrete stairwell rose into black. Nordberg led the way, then Trevor with Bobby shouldered between them. Then Helmut, Gustav, Stark and Harry at the rear, shotgun now ready and steady. At the top they found the steel door, and for a moment, just the moment, the world was quiet. Behind them, the sewer whispered. Ahead, only the muffled hum of generator power and the promise of more blood. They leaned against the walls, breathing the foul air, each of them privately considering how many more steps he'd be able to take. Trevor let out a sound between a sob and a laugh. All this and we're just in the mudroom. Nobody argued. They cracked the steel door with a crowbar and a lot of prayer. The hinges groaned. A rectangle of gunmetal corridor yawned beyond, lined with plastic tiles and the waxy hum of overhead sodium lights. Harrison went first, then Trevor with the wounded Bobby slung under one arm. Harry and Nordberg covered the rear, Helmut holding the bandage to Bobby's ribcage with grim efficiency. The hall smelled of bleach, dried blood, and the cold ozone stink of a building trying to pretend it was still a hospital. 50 paces ahead, 2 Guardian operators paced the junction, rifles slung and voices bored. Trevor signed for quiet, and the team crouched along a bank of lockers, listening. "Heard they're cycling the kids again," said the first guard, tall and soft in the middle. "All new batch this week." The second, younger and twitchy, spat into a trash can. "Don't matter, nobody makes it to Friday anyway." Bobby shuffled his feet, trying to get the weight off his bad side. His pack slipped, clattered against a fire extinguisher. The sound ricocheted down the hall. Instant alert. Both guards spun, fingers finding triggers. Gustav shot first, 2 rounds crisp and level. The younger guard collapsed, face caved in and twitching. The other opened up, bullets chewing the wall. Trevor ducked Bobby behind a pillar, then popped out and emptied his mag, catching the guard in the thigh. Helmut moved up and finished him with a single shot to the forehead. Alarms blared. Red strobes painted the corridor in blood and flame. Doors up and down the hallway hissed open. 4 more Guardians boiled out, 2 with battered M16s, 1 with an old Russian RPK, and the last carrying an RPG tube over his shoulder. The air went instantly insane. Bullets drilled the walls, sending chips of tile into eyes and mouths. The LMG opened up, forcing Nordberg and Harry to flatten into the linoleum. Harrison, often the slowest, got hit in the chest. The impact hurled him backward, spraying the tiles with a bright burst of blood. He crumpled, eyes wide, hands flailing at the wound. Bobby, rage eclipsing pain, stood up and fired until his own gun clicked empty. He dropped the weapon and rushed forward, hollering. The LMG chewed his legs and waist out from under him. He hit the floor face first, sliding on his own blood. "Molotov!" Nordberg shouted as he tossed it down the hall. The bottle shattered and fire crawled up the wall, splashing onto the RPG carrier. He shrieked, rolled, but the flames climbed his jacket and began to eat. The RPG man, burning but still upright, pointed the tube at the pillar and fired. The warhead clipped the edge, turning the pillar and Bobby's body into red fog. Nordberg, coated in blood, took the sniper rifle and put a round into the LMG gunner's temple, which exploded wetly onto the wall. The last rifleman, seeing his friends in burning heaps, tried to flee. Harry stepped out, shotgun leveled, and blasted him square in the back. The man fell forward, a plume of bone and lung gouting from his chest. The silence afterward was not silence, but the sound of fire and dying. The strobe still flickered, making the corpses look like bad animation. Helmut crawled to Harrison, but he was nearly gone and in need of serious aid, eyes partly rolled back. Trevor went to Bobby, who was mostly missing from the waist down. The expression on his face was peace, or maybe just nothing at all. Bobby was long dead. Stark slumped against the lockers, looking wary. This was supposed to be the soft entry, he mentioned to himself. Harry stood over the dead rifleman. "Did you hear him? Last thing he shouted." Helmut nodded. He said, "Conrad." Trevor looked up, face streaked with blood and something worse. "Who the fuck is Conrad?" The team gathered their breath, looted what ammo they could, and pressed deeper, carrying their ghosts like shields. The fire on the corridor walls had mostly burnt itself out, leaving only sooty streaks and the smell of charred canvas. Trevor and the others moved through the aftermath with a scavenger's discipline, checking the bodies for ammo, weapons, anything not fused to meat. Helmut found the red keycard on the corpse of the LMG gunner. He held it up, the plastic gleaming through streaks of congealed blood. "Only opens the interior," he said. "Probably the observation room." They made their way to the next junction, Trevor up front, Stark beside him. Harry and Nordberg kept their backs to the wall, wary of the possibility of more. Halfway down the hall, a thick door, red-striped chemical hazard stickers curling at the corners, slammed open. Two figures in white lab coats stumbled out, wild-eyed and empty-handed. They ran. Stark didn't even break stride. He raised his rifle, fired twice. The first man collapsed, face first, scattering a bouquet of glass vials. The second stopped dead, hands raised. Stark stabbed him in the throat, clean and deliberate. The scientist staggered, blood fountaining down his coat, then crumpled in a heap at Trevor's feet. Nobody spoke for a full 3 breaths. Nordberg's face was pale, streaked with sweat and what might have been tears. Harry stared at the bodies, then at Stark. Stark wiped his blade on the lab coat, eyes cold and small. "They would have called the rest. We don't have time for hostages." Trevor looked at the dead men, then at his hands, which had started to tremble. Helmut just nodded, pocketed the keycard and moved to the door. The team kept moving, boots slick with blood and fear, and the world behind them seemed to shrink to the size of this corridor, this job, this moment. They ran up the corridor with the ghost of Bobby beside them and his blood still wet on their boots. At the door, Helmut flashed the red card. Door open. Alarms had dulled to a low, constant howl. The entry to the medical complex was painted with old handprints and more recent streaks where hands had tried and failed to hold on. At the landing, Harry cracked the door and peered in. 4 men, body armor, full kit, he whispered. One with a wristwatch. He's checking it every 5 seconds. "Count down?" asked Nordberg, already knowing the answer. On the last tick, the men with the body armor retreated, rifles held low but ready. 2 others joined, pushing a cart with metal bins and bags. The group slipped through a side closet and into a passage that led into the mountainside. At the far end, Trevor spotted a flash of white hair and the rolling gait of an old soldier. "That's Black," he said. "Cyrus fucking Black." Black hustled his men through a reinforced door marked "Authorized Only." The instant the last one passed, the corridor behind them collapsed with a roar of plastique and dust. It shook the floor and pressed their ears flat. Trevor put a fist through the wall. "Let him go, we want the kids. Nordberg, get on the map." Nordberg's hands shook as he unrolled it. "Observation is back this way. 2, maybe 3 red doors." Helmut and Harry each took a side, clearing the passage. Trevor led, a raw bundle of nerves and sinew, his right hand holding his ribs, left on the pistol grip. Every door they passed had a nameplate, most scratched out, a few with sticky notes saying "quarantined" or "do not enter." The closer they got to the observation cell, the more the building's hum felt sentient, the way empty buildings sometimes did, like it was waiting for someone to break the rules. At the last turn into the observation room, Stark stopped short. "Go on, I'll catch up. If there's a backup system, it'll be in Krieg's office." Trevor nodded, too focused to argue. "We'll need you later." Stark peeled off, double-timing it back to the medical bays. Nordberg watched him go, thinking nothing of it. Meanwhile, in Conrad Krieg's office, Anthony Stark moved with the calm of a man coming home. He found the safe, pressed the panel, let it scan his palm. The door hissed open, and inside were folders, syringes, vials labeled in a hurried hand. Stark pocketed his keycard, then checked the computer, typing with practiced speed. The monitors flickered to security cams, then to a list of access codes. Stark straightened his outfit and headed for the observation wing, every step a confirmation of who he actually was. You see, Anthony Stark was Conrad Krieg. The corridor to the observation block bore the wounds of recent combat, soot-fingered archways, shell fragments embedded in the cinder block, a sulphurous fog that clung to the skin and tongue like defeat. Nordberg led, helmeted and sweating, his borrowed M4 barking downrange at shadows. Behind him, Trevor advanced with the dead-eyed desperation of a man chasing his own ghost. Steele kept pace, face lit in brief, strobe-lit moments by the muzzle fire of the guards barricaded at the far end. The red-sealed door awaited them at the corridor's T, bleeding light at the seams, a warning and a dare. As they advanced, the defenders behind the steel barricade, two silhouettes thrown huge against the backwash of emergency lamps, opened up with suppressed submachine guns. The rounds rippled the drywall, sent dust and insulation floating down in a gentle snow. Nordberg's magazine ran dry. He ducked behind a toppled bench and shouted, "They're dug in! Fuck this! Cover me!" He shouldered the RPG, clacked the sight open, and squeezed off a rocket. It shot 10 feet and clanged to the floor, a dud spinning on its fin like a crippled bird. The laughter of the defenders echoed in the metal lungs of the corridor. Nordberg wrenched another warhead from his pack, jammed it home, and snarled, "Try again, motherfuckers!" He braced on the floor, aimed high, and squeezed the trigger. This time the rocket screamed true, slamming the wall behind the shooters. The concussion turned the barricade to a charnel house. An instant before, two men after, only strips of flesh sliding down the warped aluminum, air filled with a mist that had been seconds before warm and alive. The group advanced, smoke cleared, and the observation block revealed itself. Two long windows shrouded in mesh, the glass behind spattered with old blood, the walls lined with observation equipment and benches for the curious. Trevor ignored the carnage. He pressed his palms to the glass, searching, lipless and mute. Opposite, in a cage little bigger than a shipping container, the children waited. There were 6. 5 huddled together. One, a boy, streaked with road grime, his mop of hair unmistakable, stood apart, shoulders square, arms up as if refusing to shrink from the monsters in the adjacent cell. Trevor exhaled hard, fogging the glass. The boy, Toby, looked up. Their eyes met through 2 inches of ballistic laminate and a quarter-mile of ruin. Across from them, in the other cell, visible through the glass, held juvenile walkers, 9, perhaps 10. They paced, ceaseless, one dragging a ruined leg in a wet figure 8. Every so often they'd pause, noses pressed to the glass, drawn by the pheromone of living blood next door. Helmut Blutt arrived, his lab coat singed at the cuffs, nose dripping, scalp flecked with blood not his own. He wiped his sleeve and examined the access panel by the observation doors. "Well," he said in a voice that carried the accent of cold libraries and colder winters, "we have a problem." Helmut jabbed the panel. "These cells won't open, not until the main entrance sealed. It's a containment protocol." "Yes?" His eyes slid to Trevor as if already searching for a scapegoat. Trevor's fists pounded the glass. "There has to be a way in. My son is in there." Helmut shrugged, lip curling. "Containment. Designed to keep infected in. And, he gestured at the child walkers, gnawing their own wrists. "Prevent outbreak. Cannot override without total lockdown. We must close the main doors, otherwise we'll let them all out at once." Behind the glass, the children pressed tighter, faces luminous with terror. Toby held them back, placing his body between the smaller girl and the grinning hunger in the opposite cage. Milton arrived at last, breathing hard. "We clear?" Steele nodded, wordless. Trevor slumped, forehead against the glass, knuckles white. Through the cage, Toby mimed something, fists raised, then a thumb pointed down. He mouthed the words, "Don't let them in." Nordberg spat, eyes glued to the main entrance down on the other side of the room. "If we don't get that door shut, we can't get this one open." "What's the play?" Helmut adjusted his spectacles. "We close the main entrance from the control room for, I don't know, 20, maybe 30 seconds. We'll have a small window to get children out before others join us." Helmut turned to Trevor. "You ready?" Trevor said nothing. He kept his eyes on Toby, the boy who'd survived months of hell just to die in a government zoo. Helmut Blutt stood at the red door to the observation wing, clutching the battered access tablet, muttering as he scrolled through Dead Man's options. Trevor braced against the main entrance, shoving at the twisted rebar and half-melted steel with the brute strength of the doomed. Behind them and outside now, Nordberg on overwatch to the hallway, a tremor in the air. Then the side corridor banged open. 2 figures barreled in. Carl Gustav, face blackened with cordite, and Harry Tagilla, wild grin carved in his face like a permanent wound. Between them stumbled two men in torn lab coats, wrists zip-tied, heads hanging. One of the captives tripped on a spent casing. Gustav yanked him upright by the scruff. "Look what we found," Gustav said, voice oiled with contempt. "Medical team. They tried to torch the archives, ran into us instead." Harry laughed, shotgun brace casual on his hip. "Best part? They wet themselves before we even aimed. Bunch of fucking heroes, these whitecoats." The moment crystallized, an unsteady tableau of war, blood, and accidental comedy. Then Anthony Stark, suit torn, glasses cracked but somehow intact, burst into the corridor. He shoved through the knot of bodies with surprising force, eyes fixed on the red door ahead. "Move!" he barked, not slowing. He hit the control panel, slapping Helmut's hand aside, and keyed a frantic string of numbers. Gustav lunged to grab him, but Anthony was already through, yanking the heavy door behind. The steel clanged shut with a bunker's finality. Inside, Anthony's steps echoed. He manned the observation room's control booth, a bunker within a bunker, and threw the manual bolt. The window gave him a full view of both the holding cells and the men now arrayed outside. Trevor pounded the glass, voice hoarse. "What are you doing, Anthony? Open the goddamn door. There are kids in there." Anthony's eyes glittered wet. He keyed the intercom, leaned into the mic. His voice, static choked, boomed out to the corridor. "Anthony's not in here, but smile nicely if you want to talk to Conrad." He was with an evil laugh. "You're not getting in. Not now, not ever." His smile flickered, grotesque, as he pressed the talk button. "These walkers, these children, they are the only future that matters. I won't let you ruin my work." Trevor lobbed a cup from a nearby desk at the control window. "You fucking asshole, you mean after all this time? When we rescued you in Blue Ridge, you're not actually Anthony Stark, but instead you're Conrad Krieg? Let the kids go." Krieg's hands danced on the console. The observation lights brightened, flooding the cells in a cold halogen glow. The walkers paced faster, pupils dilating in the glare, hissing at the silhouettes beyond the glass. On the intercom, Anthony's voice thickened, a deranged pride slurring each syllable. "You don't understand. You'll never understand. We're all done. Humanity is cooked, but they..." He gestured at the juveniles, faces pressed flat and hungry. "They are near perfection. They are clean, unspoiled by your lies, your filth, your guilt." Helmut, still outside, shook his head. "He's locked the system from inside. I could override, but it'll take time." Trevor's eyes didn't leave the cell, didn't blink as Toby reached out to him, fingers spread on the inside of the glass. "We have to get into that control room. Do what you have to do," he yelled. In the control room, Krieg drew down the blackout shutters, stared at his children, and waited. Seconds ticked. In the steel cocoon of the control booth, Conrad Krieg's face twisted by the shifting angles of the CCTV monitors. A riot of heat signatures and pulsing motion sensors. The microphone hissed as he opened the line. "Listen to me," he said, voice brittle as eggshells. "You have one option. Let me leave. My work leaves with me. Otherwise, I open all the doors. I let them feast on every living thing in that room, starting with you, Trevor, and then your precious Toby." Gustav and Harry stared into the one-way mirror, reading the outline of a man no longer hiding his madness. "Let you leave? You murdered those people in their sleep. Some of your own techs, the kids. You're a monster. You deserve to be put down like one." A pause. Only the thud of fists and skulls against the main door punctured the silence. "Monster?" said Conrad, his breath frosting on the glass, eyes twin coals of certainty. "Is a monster one who saves the next species? I could have been a god." You are nothing. You are fucking dust." Trevor pointed at the glass. "You're going to die in here, same as us. Difference is, no one will even know anything you did. You're a nobody." The air vibrated with static. Conrad's hand hovered over the master panel. "That's right, but a nobody who kills all of you," he spat. "You die!" He slammed the button. The secure red door whined, locked, and then slammed shut, nearly amputating Nordberg's fingers as he yanked them free. A klaxon began, slow at first, then building to a shriek. The juveniles in the cells wailed in response, clawing the glass as if auditioning for hell. Then suddenly red strobe stuttered. First the juvenile cell, the lock disengaged with a shudder. 6 boy walkers, hairless, semi-naked, hit the glass at once, then poured into the open straight towards Trevor, arms outstretched. Trevor reacted. He heaved a rolling walker cage from the wall and dove inside, slamming the gate behind. The boys hit the cage, teeth scraping steel, eyes rolling white with fury. In the second cell, the 5 living kids screamed. The girl pressed her back to Toby. He covered her with his body, chin up, already resigned. But the boy walkers ignored the living children, veering straight for the cage with Trevor. They were strong, fueled by viral calculus, moving in uncanny unison. First 2, then all 6 clung to the bars, rocking the cage until its wheels left the ground. At the far end of the block, the female walkers, fewer but larger, their eyes rimmed with bruised mascara, stood still. They scented the air, heads cocked, then turned in perfect synchrony toward the glass booth where Conrad watched. The female walkers advanced, slow, controlled, and well-thought walk, straight up to the glass as if they wanted Anthony and no one else. In the hallway, Gustav and Harry tried hard to manually open the door to where Krieg was, but to no avail. It looked helpless. The male walkers battered Trevor's cage, a drumline of hunger. He braced his feet, blood slick on his palms, and waited for the steel to buckle. The female walkers pressed their faces to the glass. Conrad in the control room smiled, tears streaking his face. He whispered, "Yes, yes, aha, I see you remember me." The first sheet of reinforced glass spiderwebbed, then began to give. The end had begun. Steel mesh pressed into his cheekbone. The taste of battery acid and bile percolated at the back of his throat. Trevor lay semi-coiled, knees drawn up, rifle cold and ugly in his hands. The world was a cauldron of noise, shrill, feral squeals, the rhythmic shudder of fists on metal, the wild clack of teenage teeth that belonged on milk cartons and not on the wriggling jaws of the dead. He counted them in the half-dark. 6, they pinned him to the cage's rear, arms wriggling through the mesh, nails scraping him raw. The youngest couldn't have been more than 12. It made him feel sick. Their heads semi-shaved, their limbs new-sprung and delicate as reeds. But they fought like rodents drowned in lie, rending and tearing, brains flickering with the basest hunger. Trevor knew it was him or them. He still had the rifle. It had once belonged to a school resource officer, the brass plaque still zip-tied to the buttstock, an absurd relic now. 6 rounds left. He checked them as a priest might check beads on a rosary, the ritual calming his hands as blood welled sluggishly from his left forearm. A thunderous crash echoed from the corridor, followed by muffled voices. The cavalry coming to breach Anthony's door. Trevor's pulse quickened, then faltered as he recognized the hollow moan of wind through the ventilation system. He buried the disappointment deep in that dark mental compartment where hope goes to die. One of the juveniles squirmed up the cage, face flattening against the wire, eyes pearl white and convulsing. Trevor jammed the rifle through the diamond gap and fired point blank. The head came apart with the sound of a dropped watermelon. The body twitched, still grasping for him even as the chin caved in and pinkish pulp slithered down the mesh. He pulled the bolt, chambered the next round. Squeals rose in pitch, almost human now, almost. He forced the next shot. This one took the head clean off. A geyser of black syrup painted the wall, missed the next. The muzzle flash blinded him, ears ringing, and the round ricocheted into the cage ceiling. By the time he recovered, the oldest walker, probably a 15-year-old maybe, hair still in pigtails, had her fingers hooked through the mesh, digging at his chest. He pushed the barrel up under her chin, felt the jawbone shatter as he squeezed off the 4th shot. Only 2 left. The other 2 were smaller, siblings or twins by their matching outfits. He hesitated and they nearly had him. They were quick, darting, working together. One latched onto his calf, but the teeth couldn't get purchased through his jeans. He hammered the rifle butt into the skull and fired the 5th round into the eye socket. The head jerked back, scalp splitting, body spinning away. The last one slipped under his guard, crawling through blood and bone chips. Its hands closed on his ankle, pulling itself up with obscene determination. He leveled the rifle, paused. This face was so small, so heartbreakingly intact, lips bitten through but otherwise unmarked. It looked up at him. Trevor fired and the teen's skull split like a winter gourd, brain matter steaming in the cold air. Then silence, except for his own breath and the drip of fluid off the wire. He slumped, rifle across his lap, watching the bodies convulse through the mesh as whatever dark energy animated them faded by degrees. At the far end, a pale blue stuttered across the floor, the emergency light. There was a crunch. the unmistakable sound of boot heels on broken glass. It was Helmut moving with the stiff, deliberate precision of a marionette. He carried a boxy, scarred toolkit in one hand, pistol in the other. The professor's eyes never left Trevor's, except when they flicked to the bodies slumped in the cage. Helmut placed the toolkit at the cage door, said nothing. With a gloved finger, he pointed to the far wall where the security panel blinked red. Trevor nodded. His hands shook too much to do it himself, so he slid the rifle out between the mesh and pressed the unlock lever with the barrel. The lock disengaged with a coughing clunk. Helmut shouldered the door aside. The weight of it nearly knocked Trevor to the ground, but Helmut caught him, one hand on Trevor's collar, the other keeping the pistol steady. 4, Helmut said, voice dull as corroded lead. 6, Trevor corrected, hoarse. He gestured to the pulp splattered on the ceiling. They're kids, he added, as if that changed the calculus. Not anymore, Helmut said and clicked the safety off. We need to sort out this Krieg asshole. Time to hurry. Together they limped down the corridor, leaving the still forms in the cage behind. Helmut and Trevor guided the survivors through the observation lab, past 3 female juvenile walkers. The undead girls pressed against the control room glass, fixated on Conrad Krieg. Their bloodied fingers smeared the barrier as they strained toward their creator, their tormentor, oblivious or uncaring of the escaping group. With a final glance at the macabre tableau, Helmut pulled the heavy door shut behind them. The hallway door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss. Helmut knelt at the observation cell's control panel, his toolkit open, fingers working methodically across the circuit board. Harry melted into the wall's darkness, shotgun resting on his knee, thumb drumming a nervous beat against the barrel. Beside him, Nordberg wiped sweat from his brow, fingers twitching with the restlessness of a man too long between kills. Helmut's efforts had raised the control room door just enough to create a foot-high gap. Through it, Trevor could see legs sprawled on the floor. Anthony's legs, no, Conrad's legs, he corrected himself. Beyond, shattered reinforced glass and a partially collapsed blast shield revealed why those legs weren't moving. Conrad was pinned at the upper body, wrestling with juvenile female walkers whose grasping hands had found their prize. Only his lower half remained exposed beneath the door, defenseless in the corridor's harsh light. Harry looked at Gustav, who nodded. They both understood the ugliness of what came next. Harry leveled the shotgun and slid forward on his belly, careful not to expose anything to the gap. At 2 yards, he poked the barrel under the door and, without ceremony, blew off both of Conrad's ankles. The echo rebounded like a slap. Conrad made a sound, not a scream, but the voided gasp of a man who had always expected betrayal but never quite prepared for it. He slumped forward, hands splaying open before collapsing to the ground, unconscious. Had to, Harry said, more to himself than anyone. Gustav looked up and replied, "Fuck him." Rescue seemed a hollow word for what remained. 5 children with shaved heads huddled in the corridor, their scalps smeared with blood and worse things. Bob Brown cradled the smallest against his chest. A girl no older than 12, her face frozen in terror, fingers locked around his neck like she'd drown if she let go. Behind them came Milton Nordberg, jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed at his temple, and Trevor clutching Toby tightly, lips moving in a whisper only he could hear. "Janelle, I did it." The words repeated, a promise once thought broken, now fulfilled. The hallway leading to the observation room was smeared with reminders of the prior combat, and a blood trail where they dragged Krieg out under the door. A toolkit, broken, hanging from a door handle. Upturned tray of spent syringes, clotted with brown and black and bits and pieces of people from the earlier RPG blast. The power had returned in patches, casting stark rectangles of light and shadow along the corridor, so that the group resembled silhouettes, puppets behind mildewed gauze. The 3 female walkers had been sealed inside the room, but that proved insufficient. After an hour, they began to hurl themselves against the armored glass, driven not by hunger, but by an obsessive fixation. The glass had not completely shattered, but webbed fractures spidered across its surface. It flexed with every impact. On the far side, the trio were visible in slivers and segments, chalk-pale, hairless, teeth bared, faces ruined by starvation and self-cannibalization. Only one thing appeared to animate them: the inert body of Conrad, sprawled in center of the floor. Harrison pressed his face to the observation slit. "They're not even looking at us," he said. "They're watching him, like cats waiting for a bird to move." Milton Nordberg grunted. "We're out of time. If they get out, we'll have to fight them in the open." Trevor said, "Can't we just leave them in there?" A silence. No one could say it, but all imagined the glass failing, the doors springing wide, and the corridor filling with predatory shrieks and gnawing teeth. No, they could not leave them. Preparations began with a methodical calm. They returned to the cargo bay, stepping over the corpses that had not yet cooled. Someone, Harry probably, suggested fire, and so the plan unfolded. They would drag acetylene tanks, full and half full, and industrial drums of denatured alcohol to the vestibule outside the observation room. They would bait the walkers with Anthony's unconscious body and ignite the corridor with bullets and hope. It was Nordberg, shoulders wide enough to block the hall, who loaded the acetylene. "My father used to do this with feral hogs," he said, almost conversational. "You trap them, don't try to chase. Make them come to you." Harrison, "What if the whole building goes up?" Bob Brown shrugged. "Better that than them running loose." No one argued. The assembly line of violence moved with grim precision. Trevor and Nordberg rolled 2 fuel drums into place. Harrison checked his weapon, then double-checked. Harry returned with the last of the acetylene. Bob Brown hovered nearby, eyes always on the rescued girl, afraid to put her down, even as she dozed in fitful bursts. In the observation room, the 3 juvenile females watched Conrad through the glass. They moved without coordination, overlapping, their feet worn raw, the floor beneath them slicked in mucus and fluid. When the men slid Anthony's unconscious body closer to the door, the trio snapped to attention. Hands clawed at the glass, scraping blood arc hieroglyphs. When Anthony twitched, some neural storm, some residual memory from the coma he was deep within, all 3 shrieked in perfect unison, and the sound vibrated the glass as if with rage or longing. They wanted him, and they wanted him bad. Milton Nordberg stood nearest the door, his service weapon drawn. He said, "Once we open this, there's no turning back." Harrison, "You want to say a prayer?" Nordberg shook his head. "No." Trevor did, quietly, as if for himself. "Hey guys, let's do this for Bobby Valente." The last preparations, Bob Brown and Harry took positions in the cross hall. Harrison flanked Nordberg. Trevor hovered at the ready, clutching a fire axe. They arranged Anthony's body on the floor, just in front of the pressure-sealed door. The unconscious man's breathing was shallow. A bruise had blossomed across his cheekbone, and his hands twitched against his chest as if warding off invisible blows. Nordberg chuckled to Harry. "He looks kind of funny, he's got no feet." Bob Brown peeled the girl from his torso and handed her, trembling, to Trevor. "You take her and run. We'll finish this." Trevor nodded, holding the child with one arm, the axe with the other. His mouth was open, lips moving, but nothing emerged. He led her to Toby, who was in the cargo bay with the other kids. When the lever was pulled, the door's inner lock hissed, and the gap yawned wide. The stench was immediate, wet and fungal, as if something had rotted alive inside the wall. The 3 juveniles did not hesitate. They flew at the opening, fingers hooked into claws, jaws distended. In the instant before they breached, one could have mistaken them for living girls, emaciated, bald, eyes gone milky. But the illusion shattered when they fell upon Conrad some 10 meters up the hallway. They burst towards him. As they rounded the corner, they came straight into the fuel drums and acetylene canisters. The gunfire began with Nordberg, measured and precise. Harrison followed, less disciplined, spraying at the knot of bodies. Bob Brown waited until the creatures were tangled with themselves, then fired a flare into the pile. The fuel caught instantly, blue flames crawling up the acetate-soaked cloth and into the hairless scalps and gaping mouths of the trio. For a moment, all was screaming. The sound was impossible, layered, as if the dead had learned to harmonize their agony. The bodies convulsed, charred black, melted together. The heat drove the fire up the ceiling tiles and along the walls where it licked at the barrels of denatured alcohol. There was a thud, a second, and then the tanks ruptured, filling the corridor with a bloom of orange-white incandescence. Everyone dove for cover. The shockwave rattled loose panels and blew out the remnants of the reinforced glass. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained of the walkers but scorched meat and fragments of tooth embedded in the steel floor. The hallway was pitted, streaked with carbon, the very air vibrating with heat and ionized fear. In the charnel aftermath, Conrad Krieg remained alive, barely. He was clear of the first assault, but his legs were burned to the thigh and his hands were missing fingers. His eyes, those blue-lensed orbs, tracked the men as they approached. Bob Brown was first to him. He's still breathing, he said, as if it were a disappointment. Milton Nordberg stood above the body. It's done? Harrison, I don't hear anything else, just him. They ringed Anthony, living men, a circle of judgment. Trevor and the rescued kids hovered at a distance, the child's face buried in Trevor's neck as he carried her while holding Toby's hand. Krieg couldn't speak, but coughed instead. The sound was wet, bubbling. There was no plea in his eyes, only a reptilian defiance, the same that had survived every failed experiment and betrayal. Harrison said, "We can't leave him, not like this." Nordberg knelt, drew a knife from his boot. For a moment he rested the blade on his knee, as if considering all the choices that had led to this instant. "This is for the children," he said. He drove the knife down with surgical force, puncturing his heart. Anthony shuddered, then stilled. There were no words after that. They left the body in the corridor, the stench of cooked flesh following them as they limped away. Outside, the storm had relented. The sky above the ruined laboratory was pale, almost innocent. In the morning, they would bury Bobby Valente. No prayers, no hope, only the thin, stubborn promise that they would survive another night. And that's all they needed now. For tomorrow, the hunt for Cyrus Black begins, to be continued. For those of you who made it this far, thanks for watching Chapter 1 of our Road to Redemption campaign. After rescuing Toby and the other children, killing Conrad Krieg and destroying the majority of the Dawsonville laboratory, the group will need to make a decision. Pursue Cyrus Black and stop any future work he attempts around Hafnan syndrome, or continue their trek to Atlanta in the hope that sanctuary can be found. This has been a learning experience for myself, and despite the time that's gone into it, been somewhat enjoyable. To those of you who've messaged me about how much you've enjoyed it, thank you very much.